Recording is on.
Hello and welcome to DXdao Governance Discussion for Wednesday, November 23rd. Happy early Thanksgiving. We will look at the agenda first. Get the Brave browser this time. So as always, we'll go over the proposal roundup, some proposals on Mainnet and Gnosis chain here, and then just some discussion topics here. One, just the proposal to upgrade the DXD token model. There's a draft proposal that has been up in the forum for 5 days now, 6 days now. And then just circling back from last week's discussion on the budgetary process stuff. And we'll do that after the proposals there. But let's start with the mainnet proposal roundup. And I think like the big one here that's gotten a lot of discussion and a lot of votes on is this registered new contribution reward scheme, which we've talked about here before, but there's been a lot of discussion in the last couple days on this. There was also a post in the forum, I don't know if I had that here, that from a 3AC, which talked about comparing those. So yeah, this proposal, so now the reason we're getting the right link is because whenever you have a proposal that switches from positive to negative in less than, I think it's 2 days, I'm not sure what it is for this scheme, you enter the quiet ending period, which basically restarts the proposal countdown clock so that it's at 4 days. So the point of this is you couldn't have a last second governance attack. So you could have a proposal passing like the whole time, right? And someone comes in at the last minute to change it the other way. And then if they were able to the proposal to execute, then that kind of, I don't know, be unfair in a way. So the issue though was that the front end was not registering multiple quiet ending periods for the proposal to go in through. So the way that this happened was it actually was it was for the proposal for a while, and then 2 addresses voted against it. So it was against it, that entered the quiet ending period, but then people voted for it again, and that should have kickstarted a new quiet ending period on DXvote on the front end, but it did not. It did kickstart at the smart contract level, right? So that's why the quiet ending period is still going online, but it was hard to, we couldn't see that from the front end. So the fix that Augusto put out yesterday was to be able to like show that there. And so that's why you can see there's actually 2 days left of this proposal, assuming that it would be even if no one else voted on it. Now, if someone voted on it the other way, then that would restart the quiet ending period in the other direction there. So I think that's quiet ending period. I don't know if Augusto wanted to mention something, or Adam and Dave, I think, had some interesting kind of discussion on this.
No, I think the postpath 3AC details everything quite well. The difference between the contribution reward and
Did we lose Augusto?
I mean, I can briefly
speak. Yeah, go ahead. I wasn't sure if it was me, because it's Augusto though. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we posted a forum, so me, Adam, and Phil looked at it and did a little review of the differences, which generally seem to be fine. Of course, this is like from the governance 1.5 contracts, which I think we're also still undergoing audits, but overall, you know, it does look fine. I also voted on the proposal with 1%, actually with the purpose of it not over timing. But yeah, at the time of voting, I was also under the impression that we were actually just reusing the same existing deployed scheme that was on mainnet, just adding that validation function, right? So I was actually even not aware that at the point where I voted that this was actually one of the newer contracts. And I think like overall, from what we looked at, it seems like it's, you know, safe to do. I guess it's more for a question for DXdao to decide whether to deploy this new one already, or whether we want to, you know, just take the existing one that's already being used and just add the validation function there. I guess the main benefit really there is it's just much more easier for everyone to actually check the changes made and stuff, you know. But yeah, and that's also why I just followed it with 1%, not with my whole rep. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, same back. Yeah, the changes introduced was based on the development process that we do while we work with these legacy smart contracts and everything that we have on the DXdao contracts repository. So again, there is a detailed summary of the diff report, analyst diff report done by 3AC. So yeah, the only change on the code is the validate params. The validate params function, I think, is the name of the function that check the parameters. I mean, the parameters of the voting periods and the configuration of the proposal that is sent. That's it. That's the only change introduced on the logic level. Then we have all the changes that were introduced on the developer operations of the DXgov contracts. And I added on the topic the instructions, which I guess they are maybe difficult to execute. I don't know if you can execute it on Windows, maybe not, but anyone with a Linux machine can clone the smart contracts. Can clone the smart contracts, go to that commit, do the build, and generate the smart contract that was deployed on Mainnet. So everything is pretty public, very transparent, and yeah, we are good to go for the change on the contribution reward.
And I guess Adam, I wasn't sure if you wanted to say anything, just because I know you had some interesting comments before, but I think Dave kind of maybe echoed those.
I think I don't have anything to add. Just the fact that if I would have done this, I would just take the old deployed contract, modify the thing, and then the difference between the deployed one and then the new one is going to be very obvious for everyone to review. But obviously, like the new one that Augusto has deployed basically adds features from like governance 1.0, 1.5, and then I think he also agreed with the Open Zeppelin dependency. So you can see that it's pretty obvious where, especially in the ownable contract, which basically extends the context contract. And then you have a significant change in terms of like using underscore message sender function instead of the global variable within the utilities, which is a message.sender. So I would just recommend that we redo this whole thing again with the old contract. I mean, obviously, it's up to governance to decide for that.
Yeah, and I think so. Like Dave, Candy Fork voted for this proposal, and so that was the initial kind of vote for, and that was, I think, I voted on Friday, and we had talked about it on these calls before, and I voted at that time thinking it was exactly what Adam described. I thought that this was simply just the contribution reward scheme that had those parameters slightly changed. That's why when we went through on the call, like what I was trying to do was basically validate the scheme as it existed and the parameters of the scheme, because I was considering that that was like the key thing. So I think knowing what we know now, that this is not just the existing contribution reward scheme, but is actually like with the governance 1.5 contracts with those parameters changed, I would not have voted for this proposal. And so I think that is maybe a consideration for what we're thinking about going forward on that for people that are still kind of out there with voting. I think it is really important that we develop a more robust process around these. So if we're introducing a new scheme, that should be like very clear to everyone that this is like a scheme that has like certain changes. And I think clearly here it was not clear to everyone, even though we went through that kind of process there. I think the shift to governance 1.5 is very important for DXdao to go through it. I think there's like a plan for that. It's going through audit now, and we have that, and that's an important thing. But I think that's separate from what this fix was trying to do, which this fix, and this is what we were presenting, the reason that this was something worth doing was not to integrate governance 1.5 contracts it was to prevent proposals from submitting like multiple periods. And so I think if it was like just doing that, then it would be as Adam was describing. I think that's what we do there. So I think there's 2 days left on the proposal there. It sounds like the scheme looks to be good. But if there's 1% on difference between the two there, we'll see how the vote goes. But I think going forward, we should have a much more robust process on how we make these huge changes. I think having a DAO talk post on this is kind of like a necessity, and we could have the discussion that we were having, some of those in Keybase and elsewhere, but just clearly signaling what these are so there isn't any confusion.
Chris, when you say if you had known what you know now, you would have not voted for, would you have voted against or just not voted?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to know without like other people for, but I would probably have, because I guess I wouldn't. Yeah, I probably voted against. Yeah.
So
so the reason I'm saying is because you can't change your vote, right? So I voted with what I thought was the time. I can't go back and change, even though it's in the quiet ending period. You can't change your vote. So Dave voted with 1%, and he can't go back and he can't vote with the other 3% the other direction or something like that. And I think like the downside here, right, is if this gets rejected, right, we basically just have to resubmit, and it takes another 20 days. But I think that could be beneficial. I mean, you could look from the security perspective, but I just think from the process and communications perspective that we all like kind of clearly know what it is. I think that is important. And right, we are monitoring this stuff on every proposal. We're looking at them kind of coming in on mainnet. So like the risk there is manageable in the short term. I still think this is something we want to fix. And if it's an easy fix of just adjusting like one thing, but to me, that would be the best way forward. But again, I can't vote. But Adam, I know that if you feel kind of certain way, you think you still have like a vote out, and even your rep percentage could swing it here. So I think there's 2 more days for it to be there, but something to consider. Okay. Any other? I guess that's just the first proposal on mainnet. I guess when I say first proposal, because it's in quite an ending period. There are a couple other proposals on mainnet here. First, let's switch it up a little bit because we have this error getting proposal title from IPFS. This, though, you can see is with the ENS public resolver scheme, and there is actually a post on. Oh no. Huh. I guess I didn't link to it here, but the DXdocs update and proposal. This is one to make some updates here. Keen to know if there's anything to say exciting about DXdocs or another great update.
Nothing exciting now, but I did post this in the forum because I think DXvote didn't take the IPFS data. So this is everything that was in the proposal plus a little extra context, and not really a massive change, just kind of a small update around the contributor UX side of things. The more important thing, of course, being that DXdocs is looking to transition to some kind of multi-sig or the guilds when we get it, so we can do more timely updates. Don't require a whole mainnet proposal process, even if it's a shorter proposal, of course, to set a ENS. Thinking about that, and I'm thinking about a more kind of open process, so nothing has to go through the DX Voice team. Anyone can make those changes, which you technically can today, but putting processes in place for that, I think, would be good. Looking to do that over the next month or so here.
I think you could have it right where the ENS could still is in DXdao.
Yeah.
But like the controller is controlled by guild there.
Yeah, that's exactly
updates,
the
right?
idea.
So I think that's like a really cool thing. I guess we have to think about how to. I know we do this for NIMI already, but I think that was set up outside of DXdao. But I assume there's probably like some function we need to call on the ENS to assign a controller outside to a different group. But yeah, anyway, that's a cool way of doing it. Okay, so that's DXdocs, and then we have one more proposal, two more proposals on mainnet. Both of these are kind of treasury-related ones. Dave, maybe what is this Mimic Vault test proposal here?
Sure. So this is a vault that Mimic deployed. It's a vault that essentially just wraps ETH and sends it back to the DAO. So this is mostly just due to a limitation we currently have on mainnet where we can't send ETH to a smart contract. So this would just allow us to, wrap large amounts of WETH and just hold WETH in the treasury if we decide to do so. I guess this was initially mostly while we were doing buybacks with ETH on mainnet, we required WETH. And yeah, this is just like a completely trustless way for us to kind of like wrap ETH. So it's kind of like a very little baby step we're taking with Mimic to kind of try out some of their vaults. And I think this is also like an initial step in kind of like bringing some redundancy to multi-sig. So before we always had to send the ETH to a multi-sig, then have authorized signers, wrap it, send it back to the DAO. And with this, we're kind of like completely removing that kind of trust part. So we can just through the DAO completely easily wrap ETH. And, we're also working with Mimic on more complex vaults for like depositing LP liquidity positions, etc. And yeah, this is just the first one that's live, due to pass in 1.5 days. And really all that we're expecting is we send 5 ETH and we get slightly below 5 WETH back. So what they do is they actually have a bot that executes this on your behalf. And so they just take the transaction fee. So they don't actually charge a fee for the service, but they just deduct the gas fee their bot pays to do all of this. And yeah, the WETH just returns to the treasury.
Yeah, I can't remember. They showed us this on, I think on Gurley or something. But I guess this would be what it would be sent to. You see the contract here, smart vault, but it will. Yeah, it's kind of cool. As Dave was saying, like they're basically paying gas from the vault itself too. Yeah, and I think this is. I think Dave said. I can't remember exactly how I put it, but I think this is when we get into the autonomous in DAO, right? And maybe this, some people say automated is another thing. When DXdao is doing things over and over that are the same things, and it relies on individuals to execute that, right? In this case, the multi-sig, just to do something simple. Like, is there a way to make that automated and autonomous, meaning no one needs to be involved in that? And so we can do this here with the wrapping the WETH, right? We can program this smart vault to do something that is very predictable, and then we kind of make it more autonomous. And I think obviously you think of things like bridging is another one, right? We could think about that's something done by a lot of multi-sigs. Is there a way that we can make that more autonomous? And I know Ross has thought of that, but yeah, I think this is a good step in that direction. Yeah, and so then there's the last proposal on mainnet is a cow swap order for DAI DXD. So this is I guess the first order submitted, I guess on mainnet for DXD since last year. So we've been using cow swap only on Gnosis chain. So this would be like the first one using it on mainnet for DXD. We have tested in the past for buying other things, other tokens. I think just a DAI to ETH trade. But this would be the first one that would be doing DXD, and it would also be the one that was using a stablecoin, DAI in this case. And the reason being, if you're looking at kind of the buybacks and how that's affected, the price of treasury, all the buybacks have occurred in ETH. That's what you're using the currency to pay for DXD. That's mostly because most of the DXdao treasury has primarily been ETH for the last year or so. But the price of ETH has declined a bit. So if you're purchasing DXD and you have the option to use ETH or dollars, basically using dollars as a way of either not selling ETH or buying ETH. And given both the low prices, crypto prices right now, and how things have declined, but I also just think like the makeup of the treasury, since the makeup of the treasury is both stablecoins and ETH, that it's important to have like a balance in terms of what's actually being used as the purchase currency there. So this is one that is using stablecoins. It will take a long time to get through because it has to go through the multi-call 2 scheme. So it'll be another 15 days. I think we're gonna probably submit a couple before they go through, just to get these kind of started, because they do take a while to go through, and just hope that the first one works and there's not really any problems with it. Now, of course, like the downside here, the risk you can see is pretty clearly on each of these orders that there is like a maximum price that DXdao would be willing to pay. I think for this one, it's 545 DAI for DXD, because no one really knows what the price of DXD will be in 16 days. So that will be there, but it would get executed at the market price, whatever the market price would be there. So yeah, this is the DAI DXD. Maybe in the future we'll actually maybe we could use like a different stablecoin too, so we're not just using DAI, because if you are using something like cow swap, then it really doesn't matter what stablecoin you're using to make the trade, because it'll just route that in the initial one there. Cool. And that's it for mainnet. Let's head over to Gnosis chain. Yes, here we go. So we've got a couple different worker proposals. We have Boris Block here at the top. This is the first half of his proposal there. And then we have D Labs, first half of his worker proposal from November to January. Then we have a super highly voted ENS renewal refund proposal. I guess I always like these proposals only because these are ones that are very easy to verify, because you can simply see these transactions and then see what account is using them, and that those are good transactions, and they're done by D Labs, and this is submitted by D Labs, so it's easy to verify those. Yeah, and then we have Wayne's worker proposal here at the end of his second half of this one, and then the first half of the other that is now available for voting. There's one cow swap with DXD order, and then just boosted a little, or just staked on a little while ago, is Van Grimm's proposal. These are both the rep and the compensation is being split up in these as well. Any questions, thoughts on outstanding proposals on Gnosis chain? Going once. Okay. So that's it for, and we didn't have, there's no active proposals on Arbitrum today. Yeah, so that's it for the proposal roundup. So wanted to talk about two different items today, a little budgetary process check-in before we get to that. Wanted to kind of provide an update on DXD token working group and where things have gone with that. So, we've been updated on this call the last couple months. That originally the first meeting was September 1st. There's been 5 meetings with a halfway point in Colombia, where we gave an update to a lot of different contributors there. So again, this was like the goal was to find some long-term solution in terms of like DXD value and working with like DXD holders on that. So this is, I guess, the outcome of that right now, the unofficial outcome that's up for discussion right now. So we've posted in the forum last Thursday and prepared on the call, discussing the call with a couple changes then. So I just wanted to maybe go through it a little bit here, and then I had a kind of comment at the bottom and see if there's any additional comments or questions or discussions about this. So yeah, this is just kind of background of where we've been at, right? So DXD has been around for 2.5 years now. When the bonding curve launched, a lot has happened kind of in that time. Even just the buyback program itself has been around for more than 18 months now, like 19 months now. So there's been this kind of period where the clear way that DXD is kind of getting value through this buyback program, but it's kind of like an ad hoc thing, not really like a long-term commitment that this is going to continue like going forward. I always think it is important, to acknowledge that, since the bonding curve launched, since DXD was launched and ETH was taken in, I think DXdao and rep holders here specifically have done a very good job of governing the treasury, whether that's through the diversification of the treasury into stable coins, whether that's through like the DXD buyback process, which has been kind of ongoing for 18 months. I think it's like clear that there has been some governance benefit from the last 2 years on that, in addition to all of the product development and cool things that DXdao is producing there. That's where we're at now. But again, that's not the long-term kind of way and the long-term relationship here. So that's what the DXD token working group was here. And so this proposal really has kind of three elements to it. Or one, it introduces 4 tools into the DXD monetary policy framework. 2 is establishes a DXD monetary policy committee. And then 3, funding product development and other initiatives that further DXDAO's core mission to enable community freedom. And I think this is kind of something that I think was core, or is really key, that we wanted to take out of the working group, is like, how can we have a very simple answer to like, why is DXD valuable? Why does the token kind of gain value? I think a lot of people are thinking this question a lot these days with FTT, and why does BNB have value? Why does FTT have value? Why do tokens themselves have value? And so being able to answer that question like very easily, I think, is really important. So I think what we were landing on here is DXD gets its value from DXDAO's treasury, which grows from product revenue and its investments into decentralized technologies, right? So DXD is a financial asset of DXdao, right? It is to benefit from all the work and assets of DXdao, right? So any product that DXdao builds, any investment that DX Ventures make, anything that that DXdao has and is building, the financial flow of that eventually should be somehow to DXD holders. And the way that financial flow is happening is value produced by DXdao, value created by DXdao, whether it's through product revenue or that's through investments, flows to the treasury, which is managed by REP and DXD holders. And then DXD's value comes from a relationship between DXD and the treasury there. The way I kind of like to think about it, I think some people like mutual funds are kind of these ideas where you have these big pool of assets, stocks, bonds, maybe real estate or whatever. And then you have people buying into the mutual fund for the value of those different assets. And I think you kind of maybe see some of the relationship similarly. So let's get into a little bit more the details here in terms of what this means. So the DXD monetary policy framework, there's 4 key points to this: DXD floor price guarantee, inverse bonds, the ability to have new DXD minted, and then protocol owned liquidity for DXD. So I think the floor price guarantee is simple to understand, but maybe complex to implement. We'll get to that in a second. Inverse bonds are meant to basically allow for ability, almost like a dividend stream. So you can imagine if there's a world where the floor price guarantee, as we say here, is at like 70% of NAV. So that would mean DXdao committing to purchase at 70% or redeem really at 70%. But these inverse bonds would be ones that would redeem or pay out at higher percentages, 80, 90%. But you would only be able to access those higher percentage of the NAV if you locked up your DXD for a certain amount of time, right? So this is why it's kind of like an inverse bond, because it's kind of the opposite of typically how like a bond is structured or issued. But I think this is a good way of kind of creating an open market for DXD liquidity. So whenever you have a asset that is in some way like pegged to the value or is related to the value of another asset, it can be very expensive to basically maintain that peg, right? This is like with DAI. That's why DAI has so much USDC, because it needs to. That's the only way it can maintain the dollar peg, is by having constant liquidity for dollars, and USDC is the easiest way to kind of have that dollar to have that dollar loop. So for here, you don't want to have DXdao paying out all of its assets every time anyone wants to redeem, just because that's costly. You take a lot of time in calculating like redemptions, like NAV for all of that. What's much better is if you can create like an active market for that. And I think that's what the goal is with the inverse bonds. And that's why having like this DXD monetary policy committee that is meeting to kind of figure out how to issue those, I think is really important, because the whole goal of that committee is to create a healthy liquid market for DXD, which is also like financially responsible in terms of DXDAO's like long-term investments. And so then the new DXD minted. So this would be basically if DXD is trading at 100% of NAV, right? You can imagine that there's an investment that DXdao has. Maybe its NIMI has gone up a whole bunch, but that's not actually represented yet in DXdao's treasury because it's not on chain. But there's that claim there. People could be buying DXD with the anticipation for a future value in that. But if DXD would get to 100% of NAV, instead of DXD trading above NAV, any investor could go and deposit ETH or stablecoins to mint new DXD. Right? This is kind of similar to how the bonding curve worked a little bit there. So then you would have the value of DXdao's treasury would go up from the new DXD minting, and I think that is a way of capturing some of that, like not speculation, but if there's like a price expectation, that would be a way of DXdao's treasury capturing some of that value. And then the protocol owned liquidity for DXDs is the last component, and this can be implemented soon. We have the ability to do this now, but DXdao, as opposed to most other DAOs of DXD, as opposed to most of the tokens, does not have any protocol owned liquidity. Part of that has been because of the because of the price of DXD and how that's been trading. But as part of this, there would be an ability to provide additional liquidity straight from DXdao. And again, I think that's another key component of having like a healthy liquid market for DXD. And then the last component here is product development funding. And so maybe this seems a little bit different in terms of like a DXD token, like what, product development. But I think this is really important to include this in here because this does rewrite the social contract of DXdao in a certain way. When DXdao was launched, when DXD was launched, the idea is that you're going to, DXdao is going to, the funds from the bonding curve are going to be used to fund product development, which will then flow back into DXD through the bonding curve there. But as part of that, there was like a direct, well, you're going to fund product development. But if we move much more towards this like treasury-based model, there doesn't really necessarily have that same commitment to fund product development. I think that rep holders and DXD holders would continue to fund product development and continue to invest that money like wisely. But I think it's important that like to maintain DXdao's like core mission is that this like the funds raised are meant to fund decentralized technologies, to invest in those, and to be able to like earn some financial, hopefully earn some financial returns from those eventually. And so having this product funding commitment in here, I think, is a way to manage that. And I don't think it really is that important right now because I think I have it here at like 6% of DXdao's treasury, and that changes a lot depending on the price of ETH right now. And so it's not in any way a like this is what DXdao should spend every year, or this is the most it can spend every year, or the minimum it can spend every year. It's kind of just like a general suggestion on where things are at when we're considering the budget in there. And I think it's a way of managing that relationship like long term. Hopefully in the future, the treasury is much bigger and this number, would be further down, and it's almost like a management fee that you'd be paying for the treasury there. Yeah, so talked a lot just maybe before ask for questions. So there's, the proposal commits to implement. So we have kind of those general structure up here. But the first thing it proposes to implement here is a DXD floor price guarantee of 70% of treasury NAV. I think if you look at DXD right now, it's trading about 51% of treasury NAV. Provide 250K and basically provide some DXD ETH in terms of liquidity. You can see the commitments there. And then it also commits to issuing some inverse bonds into the future. So inverse bonds will take some development work. There's already some existing stuff that could be forked from Ohm, and also I think from LUSD that we can use, but that will take some time, and not to take away from anything we're working on Gov 2.0, but we want to be able to make some future commitment to this in this one, so that kind of is a strong signal to DXD holders. And so potentially we could increase these, but this would be 2 bonds, one that pays after 6 months and one that pays after 1 year, one that would pay out 85% and one that would pay out 90% of an NAV. And I think, we can think about maybe increasing this, becoming a little bit more creative with those. That's maybe something still up for debate. And then this last one, the current DXD token contract should be upgraded and the funds turned to the general treasury, right? So the DXD token right now is the bonding curve contract. And that bonding curve contract has 2,500 ETH in there. That's the buyback reserve. And it also has like 140,000 USDC that was incorrectly sent there. And then also like 16 or 17 DXD that was incorrectly sent there. So this proposal would be basically to upgrade that, take the buyback reserve, which is, that was there to support the price of DXD through the bonding curve, take that, combine it with the general treasury, and then now you have this like new relationship between the treasury and DXD. So I'll stop there, maybe for questions or comments, because I've been talking for a while. And then, yeah, if there's no questions, we have something we can talk about it in a minute. But yeah, thoughts, questions, comments? Keep going. That's what I'm hearing. So yeah, and then this was actually just this morning, a couple hours ago, just, making a comment here after some supportive comments from Connor and Hedgehog, two of the largest DXD holders. I'd be curious to hear if there's any other discussion, because I think this is obviously like a very, very huge change to DXdao and how things kind of would move going forward. So if there are any other kind of comments on this, I think a lot of contributors, of course, like this is part of like having aligned incentives. I think a lot of contributors are aligned with like wanting to have like a DXD, a strong DXD, because so much of the compensation is tied up in DXD, so much of it is vesting in a couple of years. So there is some alignment there, but this would change a lot of things. So any additional comments in the forum or here are definitely appreciated. The two things I just wanted to kind of highlight here is what this will do to DXD and the treasury. And then the second is how can the price floor be defended, and have another update there from what was in the post. So first, if the proposal passes, right, so DXD is trading at 50% right now, and the proposal passes, it commits to purchasing at 70%, right? So that's itself like a nice return right there. So you can imagine there's some DXD holders that have been using that there, and because the proposal will commit to a price floor, that means it would basically buy an infinite amount. So you can get liquidity at that amount. So there's a lot of DXD out there that may take this opportunity to sell into the price floor. So I do think this will be pretty popular or be like widely used. And so what would happen in that scenario, you can see here what I wrote up here. So the current state here is there's 34,800 DXD circulating. The treasury is at 30 million. This might be, I don't know if this is updated with ETH numbers this week, but it's around that. 30 million in value. So you can see, like, if you want to look at one DXD share of the treasury right now is $880. If there was no buyback, right? If the last 18 months didn't happen, that DXD was still on the open market, and then that also meant that the ETH that DXdao used to acquire that DXD was still in its treasury, right? If that was the case, this would be the second one here, where we would have 50,024 DXD in circulation. There was about 48,976 DXD that was issued off the bonding curve, and then DXdao has issued, I think, about 1,500 DXD to contributors and other, and also for the swapper farming campaigns. So you'd have 50,000 DXD, and then the treasury would be more than it would be without the buyback, than what happened with the buybacks. It'd be 34 million, but the DXD share of the treasury would actually be less, right? It would be 685 there. So this is where we are now. If you saw something like, say, 14,000 DXD, which I think is, maybe what we could expect, if there was, like, say, 14,000 DXD that wanted to sell at 70%, then this is what would happen here, right? You'd see the treasury value would go down a lot, right? You could see probably about 8 million. Yeah, I think $8 million would be used to acquire that 14,000 DXD. But as a DXD holder, as a long-term DXD holder, you're okay with this trade-off because you just increase your the amount of one DXD share of the treasury is. But this would affect lots of things like product. I was just talking about the product funding there, to use a percentage on that, and that's going to be affected by this. Like, depleting your capital base does limit some of your options, because you just don't have as much of a balance sheet to work with to be as creative. But this is, I think this scenario is one to consider when we're considering this kind of proposal there, and how that would work. And then the second point here is, if the proposal passes, there will need to be even more buybacks. So DXdao has bought back 15,000 DXD, but that's taken 18 months. I imagine if this price floor guarantee is passed in this proposal, there could be almost that same amount of DXD that is purchased by DXdao, but is going to happen probably over a much tighter time frame. And so we need to think about how, when we're doing the proposal on Mainnet right now was for 5,000 DAI to DXD, and we do a little bit more than that on Gnosis chain because that's where the markets are, but it will be a little bit more complicated to do this on a much larger scale. So there's a couple different options in here. We can talk about cow swap, and there's like 1 inch order. You could put 1 inch limit orders that DXdao could fill. You also could use Mesa actually, even on Mainnet, because those are not fill or kill. So those you can just do regular limit orders. The issue with Mesa, of course, is that we do need to have someone running the solvers for that. And even on Mainnet, I don't think there's anyone running solvers for GP v1 right now. And then the other option we're thinking about or kind of implement like long-term, right? Because this would basically be a way to implement this in the near term, a way to have DXdao acquire more DXD in line with this proposal. But I think like long-term, if this is, the model that DXdao agrees on, there will probably need to be a different method for a more efficient method for doing that. We're looking at like Yearn has something that they use that maybe could be implemented by DXdao that Dave, Adam, and I think Federico are looking at too. So just some options there on how to actually implement that. So those are kind of the 2 additional things to note. Maybe there's some other issues. DXD doesn't have a chain link oracle. That's for the Mesa or for the solvers? We'd have to run our own. Yeah. Yeah, this is the latest thing. People want to run their own solvers. I'm intrigued. Of course, I don't have that technical capability. Also, yeah. Okay, no thoughts, comments, suggestions. Adam wants to run the DXD oracle. Yeah. Just on his masternode. I thought there was a way of like doing it without the solvers, like on chain, like once you could like basically like hack the solution. But if it's like a single trade, you could figure that out. I mean, I'm definitely not speaking out of my league here, but yeah. That's yeah. As I always like think manual matching. It's like someone going through like the individual orders and like, I found this needle in a haystack. I found this needle in a haystack. They are good orders to fill for each other. Coincidence of wants. Okay. Well, any other thoughts on that? Make sure and direct them to the forum there. Cool. And then the other item I just wanted to kind of touch on at the end, I forgot to link to it here, is, just the budgetary process check-in here. So we talked about this last week, and I did make some adjustments to the kind of the guild budget template. But I think the schedule I've talked with, I've talked with all of the different squads, and I think this schedule here should be good for everyone's schedule in terms of getting the budgets in by these times. So the goal here is you have a presentation, and then 2 days before that, at least try to do 2 days before that, you submit the budget presentation to the forum. So there's time for review before that and a call. And then after the presentation, there needs to be 1 week before the proposal is submitted on chain. I think there's some interesting things that we're running into in some of the issues. I think one of the big ones we talked about last week is like reputation. How does reputation work in terms of distribution? Because now everyone gets reputation when they go and they submit their individual contributor proposal. But if people aren't submitting individual contributor proposals, then when are they going to claim that reputation? And then also, are they earning the same amount of reputation that they are? So that's kind of one I think to work at. And then we're talking with Melanie and Ross about basically coming up with more like processes that guilds can use to pay contributors through them. And like the way, this is kind of actually Van Group's question, will individual contributors continue to do contributor proposals? So the proposal, the individual contributor proposal would get approved by the guild itself, right? And it wouldn't go through DXdao governance, right? Because that's the problem now, is we don't want to have all of these proposals going through DXdao governance. What we want is for DXdao governance to approve the funds to be spent by the guild, and then for the guild to actually do the final approval on distributing those funds to the individuals. Now, what that means is those guilds themselves are going to have some process with them. They're going to have to be making the same type of decisions about hiring, firing, or about onboarding, I think, there. And so what I think that we want to be able to do is basically create processes, both like just processes and also like the on-chain like infrastructure, actually the product that allows the guilds to run very similarly in the DXdao way, so that you can do contributor proposals the same way, so that like, you know, contributor X can help you out with those things, but that those are just happening like through the guilds. And so I think for the suggestion that we have been moving towards is that the guilds themselves would have 3-month contributor proposals. So every contributor would submit their contributor proposal to, I mean, maybe the guild has a different form or something, but they would kind of have that, but it would be under 3-month worker proposals. And I think that would probably be easier. But again, a guild could decide that they want to do something differently. Maybe they have a different onboarding process, but there's like a default way that the guilds can operate that is like standard across DXdao guilds. And was there anything else on this? Yeah, and so for just on Van Grim on that one, like, because the guild itself will basically, in this initial stage, any contributor that is going to be submitting a proposal for the guild, they will be included in the guild budget that's submitted. And maybe it won't, for a new contributor, maybe it won't be at the specific name of the contributor. It'll just be like $6,000 for level 5 software, you know, front end person or design person right there. And then the guild itself will like distribute it from there. So yeah. Yeah, any questions, like thoughts on this? I'm going to start with the contributor X governance and treasury stuff next week. So hopefully that will be like a model or a reference point that other people can use to construct their own budgets, be able to evaluate other ones. We kind of use it as like a guinea pig. One of the other things that I think when we think about these idea of guilds and squads is, yeah, I kind of see guilds and squads as very different things, and that guilds are these on-chain governance entities, meaning they can get funding from DXdao, they can have like a reputation voting system. Those are like guilds, and then the guilds could basically almost have, I don't want to say squads underneath them, but a guild could be made up of a squad. And so what I'm thinking kind of with the upcoming budget proposals, right, is like which entities are the ones that should receive funding, which is like not necessarily the same as like who's actually executing on this. And so I think it does get complicated if there's like 10 guilds out there that are each getting funding, and then it's like, well, what do we really do differently than individual contributor proposals all going through governance? Like we haven't really done that in a way. So I think one of the ideas was floating around was in terms of the like looking at contributor X, treasury, and governance, and like, is that kind of just like an operations guild? So maybe that should just be combined, or I don't really like that name that much, but if there's like some way of just combining those into its own thing. Treasury, you could think about, actually has some on-chain issues with it, where you actually might want to guild itself. But from like a funding perspective, isn't it a little clearer to have the funding go through that? Yeah, just seeing some comments in the chat. What do you foresee as some of the challenges of having guilds implemented? I think the key thing, or the thing that would be difficult, is like, what is standard across guilds and what is the guild trying to do that's doing it themselves, right? So does the guild need to basically abide by DXdao guidelines or standards? or do they have like free reign for that? And I think we want to give free reign, we want to give autonomy, but then when you do that, then you get like 8 different systems for each of the guild managing, right? If we're going to do the accounting or the expenses for the guilds, like, are those all going to be on the same system or not? So I think, yeah, obviously the biggest challenge is like whether giving guilds autonomy while also trying to still keep them on the same system. DAOs having guilds. I think I get that. Oh, Keenan's saying operations services product. Not a bad. I guess, but I mean, I kind of like the ideas of the squads. I mean, sorry, of the product teams, like being able to, I think, spin out into really like a truly owned entity. Like I think this is still the goal with Swapper. Like there's a token for that, and I think having that is, yeah. Cool. Okay. We'll be on the lookout for early next week for the first one that we can do, and again that'll hopefully flesh things out a little bit more and the kind of questions, and then anything else that, as I said, this is like, it's a learning process. We're like, okay, we understand there's a problem with the reputation, or understand there's like a problem with like having standard processes across guilds. How will certain things, we kind of run to these issues as we're like kind of coming up to them. I think another one we're thinking about is like, if products are going to get, like, all the products of course need help in terms of like the guild itself is not self-sufficient in the sense it doesn't have like a contributor X team. It doesn't have like an operations, someone helping out with like setting things up. It doesn't have marketing, biz dev, and those are done through like other squads in DXdao. But going forward, like when we're thinking about funding, even if we want those same relationships to have the same, like contributor X providing services to Swapper contributor members, or DX Voice providing design help to DXgov for Project Davi, we still want to have those relationships. The question is, do we fund the product guild, which then pays DX Voice, or do we have this come directly from the DAO and fund DX Voice and say, you should be providing these services to Swapper, to the Swapper contributors to do like X, Y, and Z. So I think there, in the end relationship is, again, trying to be the same. You want DX Voice helping out Swapper contributors. The question is just like, through what route is easier? Is it easier or to fund? Which one kind of would DXdao prefer? So cool. All right. I'll leave it open for one last round of feedback and comments on this call. Otherwise, reach out and chat, questions, suggestions, comments. As a FYI, as I said at the beginning of the call, tomorrow is Thanksgiving in the US, and then Friday is Black Friday. That's actually a global holiday. You're welcome from the US. We've given you, I think, I don't know if everyone in the world celebrates a big shopping day, but that's what people do in the US is you either go shopping or you watch football. And this year we get to actually watch another version of football that we refer to as soccer, with England playing Wales. This is all just a big wind up to say that I will be off tomorrow and Friday, but back next week. But yes, this is a good time to say what I'm thankful. I'm thankful for, this crazy experiment of like doing this. This is really, it can be stressful and weird, but at the end of the day, you just kind of like step back and like, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish here? And like, no one's doing this. So it's fun. I'm grateful for that. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Have a happy Wednesday and happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks.
Happy Thanksgiving to all of you.
Bye, guys.